Hi, Tim. Congratulations on this wonderful film. I got to tell you, I was just a young girl when this was all taking place, but I do remember vividly my parents having the television on 24, like for the whole time that it was on. And I remembered so many of these images. So here we are 50 odd years later, and I was wondering why it was so imperative for you to tell the story from the perspective of the ABC Sports crew. I found it fascinating to watch it from that.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear. I haven't spoken to many people that have experienced it on watching a television like you just described you had. So it's of course great to hear that from someone who has seen it back then. Um, well, I think especially for today's world, our film is relevant because we're living in a world where media landscape is constantly evolving. We're having this conversation without me even seeing you, right? It's everything is digital. Everything can be streamed at any time, and I think, especially in that time, it is interesting to take a step back and see how 50 years ago television worked. Images found their way from where they've been taken to the home, to a TV set at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's so interesting, it really made me put it into perspective going, my God, are we ever lucky in the era that we live in now? It's so easy. People, can do anything with their phones or what have you. So the difficulties that they had back then with the one satellite feed is just crazy to think about it. But what I loved so much was your meticulous research. I mean, right down to the control room and the working telephones and all these things that they used in the 70s. How difficult was it for you to put that all together, Tim, and find all these things?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say to what you just said, like, yeah, it is interesting to see how hard it was back then, the technology, and how long it took. But also, what I thought is also interesting that even though the technology is very different today, I think the bigger moral questions or ethical questions are, interestingly enough, in a way still the same. And to the second part of your question, yeah, that was incredibly important to us. I mean, we just talked about how important in the way we consume news or the way we are reporting on things today is influenced by technology. And ultimately, this film is also a movie about technology from back then. So we wanted to be this then as accurately as possible. So we did a lot of research on, for example, we also could find the original blueprints of the studio. And Julian R. Wagner, the production designer, rebuilt our sets, like trying to stay as truthful as possible to these original construction plans. Also, for me, it was important that a lot of these devices that the cast is interacting with, like these walkie-talkies, telephones, would actually work, so that actually someone would be on the other line, or when Magaro gives a direction to the crew in the control room, that pushing a button actually would have an influence, something would change on the monitor wall. Because, yeah, I think this should feel real, and you should get that feeling as if you would be there in that room.
That's exactly how I felt. I was very intense. I remember working in newsrooms in the 80s and late 80s, early 90s. And oh my goodness, like it just blew my mind to watch directors and things. But I got to ask you, just to wrap it up, you had access to the real producer, to Jeffrey Mason,
Yes.
correct? And,
Yeah.
Obviously, what also stands out was the moral dilemma here. Do we show the athletes getting killed on air? Do we show, do we have to wait for the right news? I remember waiting for copy to verify, getting three things to say, unless we could put it on the air to say if it was true or not. And for them to say that everybody was freed when they weren't. What was his major recollection that you took away from that? And does he still feel kind of guilty or about it to this day?
Well, first of all, I want to say that, yeah, I don't think that he feels guilty in any way, because what should he feel guilty of, right? They were just busy with covering the situation as it is happening in front of their eyes, basically, and they were just a group of sports TV people that suddenly had to make that switch. And I think that's also the interesting thing about the specific case of Munich 72, that these people weren't trained or experienced or to report on a crisis situation like this. So you could confront them with all these questions that you just mentioned. And in a way, they had an innocent view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, thank you so much from this perspective.
And I have the highest respect, actually, also for their coverage and what they did, right? Like,
100%, yeah.
And they can suddenly, yeah.
You know, even having somebody like Peter Jennings there, of course, he's a newsman, but yes, it was mind-boggling watching it from this perspective. And I really do appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for the film. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the interview, and thanks for these words.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope you can get some rest now. Bye.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.